We had starting quarterbacks named at Ohio State, Julian Sayin, who we all expected would be the guy there, Joey Aguilar at Tennessee, and then also Steve Angeli at Syracuse, the transfer from Notre Dame. Did anything stick out from hearing those names, guys?
I think things went according to plan. So first of all, with Ohio State, it had been clear just based on the information that was getting throughout the course of fall camp that Julian Sayin had been the better of the two quarterbacks out of the two primary competitors for this job, Lincoln Kienholz being the other one, had been, as it was described to me during the course of the last couple of weeks, consistently outperforming Lincoln throughout the course of practices, the scrimmages, and it really separated, frankly, during the course of the last week or two. In terms of Syracuse, obviously Steve Angeli was a late add for them, with Fran Brown bringing him in during the course of the spring portal cycle.
By the way, after naming Ricky Collins the starter coming out of the spring.
I was about to say that's an interesting situation, not standard to add a quarterback who you're clearly bringing in to compete for starting job after you've already named your starter. So unique, is that a good way of summing it up? Unique in terms of how that went down. But that was another one where it became clear, even more clear during the course of fall camp, that this was trending towards Steve Angeli being the choice there. And then quarterbacks, it sounds like, were officially informed this morning. They had team meeting this morning at Syracuse to let the team know just what direction they were going to be going there. And now Steve Angeli, who had been in the mix at Notre Dame, part of competition there with CJ Carr, Kenny Minchey during the course of spring ball, moves on, goes to Syracuse, and now in line to take over for Kyle McCord and passing offense that people forget ranked number one nationally this year.
Yeah. So speaking of Steve Angeli, the program he left Notre Dame, and all of us just went, CJ Carr is going to be the starter then. Not so fast. CJ Carr, Kenny Minchey locked up in a battle. We discussed this on previous shows last week here on College Football Insiders. They had their second major scrimmage of preseason camp Sunday. I had someone there tell me it's still super close. You guys are plugged in much more than me probably at Notre Dame. What are we hearing? Is Kenny Minchey going to end up winning this thing from CJ Carr?
Chris, you want to go?
I think this battle is still very close. I would say, just talking to somebody over there, that both quarterbacks were a little inconsistent on Sunday, and I think that's been part of the issue throughout fall camp. There's been some severe inconsistencies in play for both of them. CJ Carr has struggled with turnovers at times. I'm not betting on this, and I don't really feel like putting like a favorite here, but I think I lean slightly towards Kenny Minchey at this point. Like if I was going to choose somebody that would end up starting, but it could still easily be CJ Carr. I think there was some hope around both camps over the weekend that a starter would be named right after the scrimmage. That clearly hasn't happened, at least publicly. And I think the clock is kind of ticking there for somebody to be named the guy as Notre Dame prepares for this. It's still very close all the way around.
Could they play both?
Until there's final decision, can't rule anything out. I will say this has gone to follow up on what both of you said. That this has gone from people viewing this as a foregone conclusion, going back to the spring, the beginning part of the summer, that CJ Carr would eventually be the starter, to this being a real battle that is, frankly, on my end, too close to call at this point. But at the very least, it is beyond clear that Kenny Minchey is a real factor in this competition. But at the same time, the group of us had discussed this going back to even last week. They still had to get through that scrimmage this past weekend. And these scrimmages, as you guys know, can carry a lot of weight as coaches make final determinations on what they're going to do. And going into the weekend, I was expecting, to just completely honest, for there to be finality and a decision within a couple of days of that final scrimmage. Right now, I'm honestly not sure when that final decision is going to come.
I spoke to a former player who I think sums it up pretty much, how the Notre Dame fan base feels about it. He basically just said, it's getting annoying at this point in time. As we get deeper into camp, you mentioned it, Brandon, after second and third scrimmages, you should be turning the page into game prep. You should have your guy. Ohio State had a quarterback competition and then just named their guy. And as we get into finally prepping for your week one opponent. So yeah, it's about that time. And the fact that they haven't named a starter means there's some legitimate indecision about who to go with.
Meanwhile, Carr.
I will say real quick to Richard's point, like a lot of these have been quarterback battles. Like a lot of the ones we've talked about today have been quarterback battles and quotation marks. This is a legitimate quarterback battle. There are no quotation marks. There is legitimate indecision there because it has become too close to call in a lot of ways for the staff. A staff, to Matt's point earlier, that was expecting CJ Carr to go and take this job for most of the offseason. And the fact that they're in that position where the guy you expected to take the job hasn't really taken it and a guy has really pushed him, I think does create some semblance of indecision at the top because you have a lot invested, particularly in one of those quarterbacks who was the top 50 recruit just 2 years ago. So it makes this the most intriguing quarterback battle by a pretty significant margin, in my opinion, nationally, because it's legitimate.
Well,
it is in Missouri to a certain degree. So Missouri is one where, like, once they brought in Bo Pribula from Penn State, I think most people expected Bo to come in and just be the guy heading into this season. And obviously the circumstances are different building up or leading up to this point. But that has, along the lines of Notre Dame, gone from someone being viewed to a large degree externally as the clear favorite to win the competition to the battle now being truly neck and neck, to where if you talk to people on staff, it's too close to call. So I think you would get that feedback from Notre Dame right now, depending on who you talk to, just like would get that from the Missouri side. Like, it reminds me of that a little bit, where depending on who you talk to inside those buildings, I think you'll get that kind of feedback that it's frankly too close to call as things stand right now.
And I think the reason why it's too close to call is another thing that I think doesn't really fill you with promise, especially if you're a Notre Dame fan heading to Miami week one, right? This is kind of a situation like we had last year with Michigan. And Matt, you covered that story really well, where you go into camp thinking, well, all right, it's probably going to be Alex Orji. And then 1 week becomes 2 weeks become 3 into camp, and Orji hasn't won the job. And it's not a situation where the backup is playing up to the level. It's the presumed incumbent starter playing down. That's the problem that I think we have here with Notre Dame, as I understand it from the way you guys have explained it.
I do want to just add real quick, and I'm sorry to belabor the point. Like, in Missouri's case, I think part of it is Sam Horn playing very well, right? And I think Kenny Minchey has also performed, I think, really well. But to Richard's point, like, it is some of the regression, at least on Notre Dame's side. I wouldn't say as much on Missouri's side from the presumed starter from what you expect to see.
I want to get into these other quarterback competitions, and Matt, you mentioned Missouri. Going into that, I mean, in this NIL era, all I could think of is when we see a big time quarterback go to somewhere, it's like, well, they invested in them, and so the expectation is you're going to be our starter, and it's got to be a little bit awkward when you're in a heated quarterback competition or there's some indecision there going into ticking down the clock here. Less than 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah. So Chris brought up Sam Horn. So part of this is the fact that Sam, who's a former 4-star recruit, has grown, has progressed, and done good things to the point that has put himself in legitimate contention for this job. This is one where, like, if did have to bet on it, I'm not saying I would be comfortable doing that, but if I did have to bet on it, I would still bet on Bo Pribula to ultimately win the job. But that has become tighter than what I was expecting heading into fall camp, and really going back to when they originally added Bo, who that was a significant investment on Missouri's part. There were some other prominent teams around the country that were after him, that were interested. He picks Missouri, viewed that as a deal that would have expected him to, I'm not going to say run away with it, but to ultimately win that job and secure that during the course of fall camp. And obviously that's still ongoing at this point. some of the other competitions that are still.
Tell me about Colorado. Tell me about Colorado. Give it to me.
So some of those, like, for example, Richard brings up Michigan last year and how that was one that ended up different than how people were expecting. Michigan's one where, can you call that unresolved at this point? I guess you technically can, since they haven't officially named a starter. But you have some of these, like Michigan, where Bryce Underwood has been the clear favorite for God knows how long at this point, going back to the spring, going back to early part of the summer, hasn't stopped during preseason.
Since they signed that contract.
Going back to December.
Well, it helps his case that like barely anybody in the room is healthy, like the entire offseason in Michigan. Like, I'm not saying Bryce Underwood hasn't played well, but like it's obvious just like based on who's been being able to walk and throw around him. Like, it's been Bryce Underwood the entire offseason. But
hey, he's been battling Jaden Davis because of injuries. So Mookie Keene, who was brought in, has dealt with injuries that's limited to him, and it done nothing but increase the likelihood of Bryce being the guy. And that's become a deal of just being a matter of when, not if, that Bryce ends up winning the job. So we'll see when Sharon ends up letting the quarterbacks know officially, or the team know officially. But it would be beyond shocked if Bryce Underwood is not starting week 1 against New Mexico, right? That they have week 1 before the interesting matchup against Oklahoma going into week 2 there. Colorado, you bring up.
Yes. Give it to me.
Colorado has an interesting competition there. So you're replacing Deion's son, Shador, who obviously did good things during the course of the last couple of years. Have a veteran figure in Kaidon Salter, who had good moments at Liberty before transferring to Colorado, battling a highly ranked true freshman
who has a hamburger named after him at the sink there in Boulder.
So Kaidon would give the edge to at this point, with part of the reason for that being the experience. I will say Julian has continued to do good things behind the scenes. So even if when Kaidon is the starter to open the year, Julian is flashed enough and is talented enough that could see that being a deal where the competition is essentially ongoing throughout the season. And if Kaidon falters whatsoever, then I could see Julian getting an opportunity there. Like, legitimately, inside that building is viewed, just based on some of the stuff that he showed or shown behind the scenes, as someone who in the next few years will be an NFL player, has been that good and impressive behind the scenes. He's just a true freshman who I think he's still like 17 years old. So the experience part of it, big time factors or big time advantage for Kaidon Salter there.
Yeah. Both Juju Lewis and Kaidon Salter were taken to Big 12 media days, which you rarely see two guys who are in a competition, let alone one of them being a true freshman, brought to media days to face that kind of pressure. But two very talented guys. I can't wait to see. And like you said, fully expecting both of them to play this year. What's going on in North Carolina?
Yeah, so another team similar to Colorado. They brought in a transfer during the course of the offseason. In this case, Gio Lopez from South Alabama, who accounted for like 3,000 yards of total offense last year at South Alabama as a redshirt freshman, has been battling Max Johnson, who's made a really impressive comeback from a serious injury last year. That's one, though, even though Max has gotten back, done some solid stuff, it would be a surprise if Gio Lopez is not ultimately the starter there for Bill Belichick heading into his first year at North Carolina.
Yeah, South Alabama was very upset when Gio left. So
I can understand. Gio's one. I'm not saying he's Tua by any means, but I've had multiple people in the football world bring up that there are some Tua-like characteristics. So again, just to be clear, I'm not saying he's Tua. I'm not saying he's going to be a future top 5 draft pick, but there are some things that if you watch Gio that have had people bring up that you see just says some flashes of different traits that remind you a little bit of Tua at different points.